Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Sadlier School Live. It is Friday, and we hope you have all had a wonderful week. I'm excited to bring on today's guest, Ellen Edmonds. Hi, Ellen.
Hi.
Ellen is the Executive Director of Professional Development for Sadlier, and she is a wealth of knowledge. I'm super excited that she's on today's show today talking to us about problem solving. So she's going to give us tips for problem solving from home. So Ellen, let's dive into today's topic.
Oh, okay. Well, I think the problem solving is an exciting thing to do at home. It really is best done in a real world context. So what better place to work with your students or your children than at home? And I think that it's important to understand that I'm not just talking about word problems. Sometimes when we say problem solving in math, parents and teachers think we mean word problems, and word problems can allow students to problem solve, but there are lots of other ways that students can engage in problem solving. And it's just thinking about, first of all, finding something that is worthwhile to explore mathematically that connects to what your child or students are already learning. It should be integrated with that.
Mm-hmm.
To think about something that can be solved in more than one way, that has more than one answer, that requires critical thinking. So for instance, I know that parents will say, I know that we have a kitchen table now, and in our kitchen table we can seat our family of 5, but what if we had 10 people in our family? What kind of table would we have to have that would fit into this space and would seat those 10 family members? And what would be the biggest table that we could sit at, and what might be the smallest table that we could sit at? And think about that with your children. And so
I love that example because it really gets kids thinking, and you might have a rectangular table at home, and then they start to think, well, what if our table was round? What would happen in that case?
right. And it can be really concrete with manipulative. So they don't have to use a measuring stick. They might use a piece of yarn to represent how big a person is. So there are lots of things. And that's a kind of problem that you can get into area and perimeter with more, with older students, with more sophisticated mathematicians. With younger children, you wouldn't do that. So that's something that we want to think about. I need to make this recipe, and I'd like to serve 2 times the number of people that would normally be served with this recipe, or half as many people, since we can't. I normally make it when grandparents can come over and aunts and uncles can come over, but now with the coronavirus, I can't.
Yeah,
So
I gotta cut it in half or something.
I've got to cut it in half, or I've got, but throw something in. But I don't have XYZ thing. Is there something else I can do? Or I only have this much. What would I do? So trying to make it something that requires them to think more critically.
I love that idea too. Like even as simple as cooking, where you're saying we're missing regular flour, but we have almond flour, or that might have been too easy of a solution, but getting the kid thinking through, not from a math standpoint even, but just from a real life application standpoint. Like if you run into a problem where you don't have an ingredient, what are your options?
That's the problem solving process really applies in every content area, and it applies in real life. And if students learn good problem solving skills, they're going to be able to apply those. We talk a lot about teaching children a model for problem solving. Eventually they'll develop their own. Mm-hmm. But if it's a word problem, they would need to read it, or if it's directions, or if there's some material, they need to make a plan. Yeah. They need to try to solve, but then they need to check to make sure that their answer makes sense. And if there are issues, they need to go back with the planning process again. And getting students to have those habits of mind, children to have those habits of mind, are really an important part of it. And I'm not saying that it isn't important to be fluent and to be accurate. We talked about that last time we were together, but you don't want them focusing so much on the answer. The process is really important, and getting the right answer is secondary. And if you don't get the right answer, having students persevere, children persevere. That's a really difficult thing to do when it's challenging and they don't get the right answer, they want to give up. Getting them to stick with it and come back and try it again, try another plan. What didn't work about this one, what might we change to come up with an answer? So,
and I know this is something you and I briefly touched on before we got on the live, was that sometimes as a parent or an educator or caregiver, I don't want to exclude other people taking care of kids, but sometimes we have to step back and allow the child to struggle a little bit and work through that problem. And maybe they don't get there as quickly as they could have if you had been a factor in that equation, but it's part of the learning process for them.
That's exactly right. I learn a lot as a teacher from watching other teachers on videos. And one of the videos that I love is a teacher who asks her students who are in 5th grade, because she says, I have a friend who just moved here and he wants to build houses. Yeah. And he's trying to decide what size houses he should buy. So I want you to think about how many people sleep in your house every night. And she gives them connecting cubes and says, represent that, so that the students do that. And then she has them actually take stickers and represent how many children or adults or family members are in their home. And they do that across a chart. And they talk about range and median and mode. And they end up talking about, so how many bedrooms should he put in the house as he's building? And they say, well, from our classroom, 4. But then one of the young students says, yeah, but there are some people that have 2 in our classroom, and some people that have 3, and some people that have 5. So most of his houses could be for families of 4, but he needs to build some of the others. So it's a very practical conversation. They use their mathematics, they graphed it, they did a lot of statistical analysis. And so that's, I think, really interesting. When I think about older students, even though this current time is challenging to use some of the graphs and the statistics we're seeing with COVID-19 and looking at, comparing that to, a previous, like the Spanish flu, and looking at, in states that have done certain things, are we seeing a difference in, what might we do differently to change this? And so, looking at the analysis of that and problem solving around that allows them to use their statistical skills. And so 6th graders and 7th graders could be working on that. So it doesn't just have to be something we do with our younger family members.
I love that idea. Genius.
I don't know if it's genius, but I think we think sometimes that we're not a mathematician and we aren't really sure if we can support our children's math learning. Being a problem solver is at the heart of being a good mathematician. Children ought to be practicing problem solving every day. It's hard to be a problem solver. It's a challenge to use your higher level thinking skills. And so problem solving every day helps students be better at problem solving. They get that problem solving routine down and understand the process that they use, get more confident in their mathematics. And so it really is a great thing. And it's not just that, it's the discussion. So we should be talking about our math. We should be using our math language. And children can teach the math language to their parents, the math vocabulary, and they can have a really great mathematical conversation at home. And the same with the teachers. Teachers can really have that sort of conversation if they're doing Zoom classwork or other kinds of opportunities to connect. They can use the real world examples. And, I think it's important. When I was in school, we did problem solving on Fridays. It was really disconnected from everything else we did. And it wasn't real world. Your mom bought 950 bananas and so it wasn't very relevant, and you couldn't really make sense of your answers because the numbers weren't real numbers. So
you're like, when in real life would this ever be a possible scenario?
Exactly. So we want to really focus on that. And certainly, we want to encourage our children to use their mathematical capabilities from a fluency perspective. So making sure that they're accurate, but I just want to emphasize that's not the point of problem solving. We need that to all come together, but the emphasis is really on really thinking about this and using your higher level thinking skills and trying to determine things that aren't easy, that are non-routine, and getting students exposed to that. So,
well, I love the examples and the tips you provided us today. So thank you so much. And I just wanted to point out to all of you watching that we have a couple of resources that may help you further dive into this topic. The first one is a masterclass that Dr. Matthew Bayronovan did for us last year on growth mindset and solving problems in multiple ways. If you haven't had a chance to check that out, it's awesome. It's an on-demand class, so the moment you register for it, you get immediate access to those videos. And at the end of that little class series, you have an opportunity to get a certificate of participation for use. The other thing that we have here is an article on our blog that Jeff Todd wrote for us, and it's on word problem solving strategies for students in grades K through 4, and it includes some graphic organizers and things you can use to help your student work through problem solving. Ellen, and I had one more question for you. Is there any way you could teach my kids how to problem solve getting their own snack?
I think we could figure that out.
I was like, maybe I need Ellen over here teaching
I would love
them,
it.
because I can't tell you how many times a day they say, I'm hungry, and I'm like, okay, well, let's think through this. What could we do? And it still hasn't clicked, so maybe someday it will. So thank you for being a guest on here again today. I can't wait to have you back next week, and I hope all of you out there have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you back here on Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thanks again, Ellen.
Thank you for letting me join you.
Yeah.
Have a
Bye.
good weekend. Bye-bye.
You too.